One of the questions we get asked most often is, what's the best wildlife destination you've ever visited?
That's kind of like asking a parent who their favorite child is, isn't it?
Kind of.
Okay.
So in this series, we're sharing our favorite wildlife experiences, along with a few that we'd probably skip and why.
And today we're talking about whales.
If you're new to our channel, we're Andy and Jennifer.
I'm Andy.
We retired early in 2026 and decided to build a life around full-time slow travel with wildlife photography guiding where we go.
We've seen whales in Antarctica, British Columbia, Mexico, Canada, Tonga, Australia, Chile, and probably a couple places we've forgotten that we've been to.
And after all those encounters, we kept coming back to the same three experiences when we were thinking about what our favorite ones were.
And if you're looking for your first whale encounter, we've got you covered. If you want something a little more immersive, we've got that covered too.
So let's start close to home, at least for us. Every year, humpback whales migrate along Australia's east coast from Victoria all the way up to Queensland.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't even need a boat. During migration, humpbacks pass surprisingly close to shore. And some of our favorite whale encounters haven't cost us a cent. And you gotta love free whales, just like the free penguins, right? On the boardwalk at Borders Beach.
And Cape Schanck in Victoria and the Royal National Park near Sydney are two places we've returned to again and again. There's something really special about spotting a 40-ton whale from a clifftop path.
And before you head out, check the local Facebook whale sighting groups. If someone's seen a whale moving past one of the headlands, you'll probably get a good idea where to start looking.
And of course, getting out on the water is even better. We've been out on whale watching boats in Sydney, Coffs Harbour, Brunswick Heads, Ballina, Hervey Bay, Gari, Fraser Island, and also in the Whitsundays. Every trip has been different. Sometimes they're traveling, sometimes they're breaching, sometimes they're resting. Sometimes they seem super interested in the boats, and sometimes they could really care less and are just cruising along.
We'll leave a link to our favorite operators in the area in the description below.
We've also seen whales in Antarctica, around Macquarie Island, off the coast of British Columbia, and those were incredible trips. But for us, the whales were a bonus. The next two experiences are destinations that we'd visit again, even if there wasn't anything else to see.
Yeah, Churchill's one of those. Churchill is famous for the polar bears, as we well know, but you can argue belugas deserve top billing in Churchill. Every summer, around 60,000 belugas arrive at Churchill River estuary, and it's an incredible sight, like super incredible.
After our day with the polar bears on Fireweed Island, on the boat ride back, we were all just kind of chilling and reflecting on the experience that we just had. And then we noticed that the boat was slowing, and then suddenly there were belugas everywhere. Hundreds and hundreds of beluga whales surrounding the boat.
And the first thing you notice isn't what you see, it's what you hear. Belugas are incredibly vocal, and I mean...
The canaries of the sea.
Yeah, whistles, chirps, clicks, And you can hear it. We're on the boat on the upper deck, and you can hear it 10, 15 feet from the water.
Yeah. And they had a hydrophone in the water as well to amplify it. And I just remember being completely speechless at what we were seeing.
And just surround the boat, stem to stern.
I think they might have been attracted to the bubbles, but even at one point they just turned off the engines and we were just floating there. You'd see some right up at the boat, and then you'd see, like, just everywhere you looked to the horizon, there were these pods of these glowing white whales. That wasn't even the highlight. The highlight came the next afternoon, and it's called aqua gliding.
Yeah, Canadian regulations don't allow people to snorkel with beluga, which is too bad. So instead, you lie flat on your stomach, mask, snorkel, wetsuit,
Really thick wetsuit.
a 7 mil wetsuit, and you're lying on like a wrestling mat, but they call it an aqua mat. And you're floating on this mat, slowly towed behind a Zodiac. It's pretty cool. Put your face in the water. It's pretty cold at first, but as soon as the first beluga arrives, you're not cold anymore.
Our guide told us that the trick was to make noise, whether you're singing or talking or whistling, basically any noise, because apparently the belugas are incredibly curious, so that draws them in.
We were all geared up, and nobody wanted to go first. And our guide asked the two other couples that were on there.
And we were being nice, like we were like, we didn't want to be like, we'll go.
Oh, me first. So we're delegating that out.
They didn't want to go.
You know why? Because they thought belugas bite. I'm sure they do, but not humans.
Yeah, so we got to go first.
Yeah, so we went in first, and it was pretty cool. The water was cold at first, but you're floating on a mat. There's nothing to worry. You're not going to drown. You're in a 7 mil. You feel like a balloon anyway. You feel like Ralphie in Christmas Story again.
So at first we were just making random noises, and then for reasons I still can't really explain, we started singing Baby Shark, and then we sang Happy Birthday. And then somehow we ended up doing the keyboard riff from Bizarre Love Triangle.
And I think it wasn't singing, it was more like talking to them. And apparently you can make these noises through your snorkel.
You sounded like either a very angry parrot or Mickey Mouse. You sound like a parrot. You're gonna make me pee.
I think they like the tonality. So I was doing the Great White North. And that sort of drove them crazy. They spun upside down, swam, and you'll see some of the video. They swam upside down. So I was doing the Great White North.
And I was laughing so hard that my mask flooded and I was swallowing half of Hudson Bay. But whatever you were doing, it worked because the whales came right up to the mat.
It was crazy.
So the whales would come closer, like first you see them, because the visibility is not crystal clear. So you just see kind of a shadow, and then the closer they would get, the more you'd be able to see until they were, like right in front of you and circling beneath us and circling off to the side. And again, they might have, in addition to your wonderful singing skills, they might have been interested in the bubbles behind the Zodiac.
Yeah. And the viz was pretty good. I mean, for Hudson Bay in August.
It wasn't Hawaii visibility, but it was.
And they're super inquisitive.
Yeah.
And the more you interact, the more noise you make, the closer they get, the more...
If you don't make any noise, they get bored and go away.
Yeah.
And we learned this
Just
because
like Andy.
we went kayaking the next day and they were very not interested.
Yeah. Kayaks don't interest them at all.
No.
Did you buy a shirt that said, came for the bears, ended up with the belugas or something like that?
It was a sticker, but yes.
There's one other experience that left us feeling this exact same way, and that was swimming with humpbacks in Tonga. Every winter, humpbacks migrate from Antarctica to breed and give birth in the warm tropical waters. And it's one of the very few places in the world where you can legally and ethically swim with humpbacks.
And the ethically part is important because only a handful of swimmers enter the water at a time. You're always with a guide, and the guides are incredibly respectful. The first time a humpback approached us, I completely froze. Our guide could probably tell. He held onto my fins so I wouldn't accidentally kick backwards. But this enormous whale just kept coming closer and closer until it stopped only a few inches from my camera. And I could see every little bump on its head, and each one has a little sensory hair growing from that. It's just an absolutely amazing experience.
I remember watching it, another whale slowly lifted its pectoral fin right over top of you. It knew exactly where you were, spatiality in the water, and it knew you were there. It was crazy. And it wasn't threatening at all. It was just an incredible, gentle, 40-ton whale checking you out. It was pretty neat.
And then there's the singing. People always ask what humpback song sounds like. And the truth is, you don't just hear it, you feel it.
Yes, quite literally, you feel it. It vibrates through your body, extraordinarily so, through your chest, through your head, through your sinus cavity. It's incredible if you get a singer and it's just sitting there at the bottom and you can hear it everywhere. It's amazing how sound travels through water. Just amazing.
Yeah, I think the singers are also cool because you can hear them, but oftentimes they're just sitting on the bottom. And this is open ocean, so it could be very, very deep. You hear them and you're just staring down into the blue. And then, much like the belugas, as they get closer, they start to come into focus and start with a shadow. And then eventually you just realize how big they are. I think with the humpbacks also, because we've been a few times, and we'll leave the link to the place that we stay, the Blue Lagoon Island, in the description below. Awesome. And they're awesome for a few reasons, but most importantly, their boats only have 4 people, so that means you get to go in the water every single time. So with Churchill and the belugas, because we were on the Aqua map thing, it felt like we were getting a little glimpse into the world of the belugas. But Tonga felt like being dropped into the middle of a humpback's world. You're not being towed, you're free swimming in the open ocean.
And it's really hard to describe until you've done it. You're floating in deep, deep blue Tongan water waiting. And then a 40-ton humpback appears out of nowhere from the blue. And it's just sort of overwhelming. Like you said, you sort of like froze the first time you saw it. Same thing, I curled up, right? Held my camera up.
When it's also extremely emotional for people. And as I mentioned, we've been a few times, and every time we've been with someone who was brought to tears because it's just that special of an experience. And sometimes it's, a curious calf that comes up to you. Sometimes it's a mother keeping a kind of a watchful eye. And if you're lucky enough to witness a heat run, you suddenly realize just how fast these enormous animals can travel.
Yes. a lot of enormous animals moving very quickly through the water.
The whales seem to like the rougher water, so on days where it wasn't flat calm, it seemed like there was more whale activity.
Yeah, a lot of breaching. The rougher the weather, the more active the whale.
Yeah. And I mean, you're a swimmer, but this isn't, like we've been on, we'll talk about a few experiences we've had in another episode where we go on tours that are swimming with dolphins or swimming with sea lions, and we're with people that can't swim. For whales, you need to know how to swim because you're not just sitting in the water waiting for, I mean, you can just sit in the water and wait for the whale to go by, but you're not going to see much. It's full out swimming.
You need to know how to swim. This isn't bathing with the whales, it's swimming with the whales.
Yeah.
So whales are unbelievably fast. Again, heat runs are different from a mom and a calf just sitting there. You're placed in the water with the mom and calves at a respectful distance. It's well maintained. If the calf comes and the whale comes to you, great. Heat runs are a whole nother thing. The boat drops you ahead of a heat run. We have a couple, I think we have a picture or two. I think there's 17 whales in this shot. And being surrounded by 17 whales moving at a speed which doesn't seem natural is pretty damn exciting.
When the whole thing from, like, let's say you get dropped into the water, you swim over to the path of where they're coming, and then they swim by. And then you swim back to the boat. That might be like a minute. It's that fast, but super cool to see.
You need to get on and off a boat, a Zodiac sometimes, or they have a swim deck in the back, and you need to time that sort of.
But when the seas are rough, again, it's not always easy to get back into the boat. There were a couple times where, I mean, I'm a diver, I'm a confident swimmer, but there were a couple times where it was rough enough that I didn't feel confident that I'd be able to safely get back in. So I sat that one out and watched from the boat.
Australia reminded us that you don't always have to travel halfway around the world for an incredible wildlife experience. Sometimes it just takes a walk down a coastal lookout at the right time of year.
And it's hard to beat free whale watching and also no risk of seasickness.
Which happens.
Yes. But if you're looking for the kind of experience that you'll still be talking about years later, Churchill and Tonga are impossible to beat.
Totally agree. And thanks for watching. If you've had an unforgettable whale experience anywhere in the world, drop them in the comments. We'd love to hear about it.
And this is just one episode in our Best Wildlife Experiences series. Next time, we're headed into the forest to meet some of our favorite primates.
And until then, happy travels.